A plan of housekeeping. As complete housewifery ornaments a queen, so does it every lady in the kingdom that possesses that treasure, the value of which preserves both health and fortune. She will not be imposed upon by extravagant servants, as she well knows what the daily expense of her house amounts to, neither by indolence, for she can see into that by surveying her house wherein that decorum and economy shines illustriously. If humane, her servants will love, fear, and obey her. But this may not be the case of the young, unexperienced lady whose housekeeper is deputed mistress, who perhaps may fancy herself supreme, and take as much state and attendance upon her as the lady herself can do. For vainglory is a great prompter where integrity and judgment is wanting, by which great fortunes have been impaired, either unjustly, carelessly, or extravagantly. The courage of one cook who served a wealthy squire in this neighborhood gave the lady's maid the mortification of seeing her take a large saucepan full of butter, that she, for want of judgment, oiled in melting for sauce, and tossed it into the sink that she put her dirty water in to run into the vennel. The lady's maid, telling one of the servants of the waste, was answered that she did frequently toss her oiled butter into that sink, and this she averred to me, that the least quantity of butter could not be less than 1.5 pounds at that one time. Yet this lady's maid, although she was a relation to her mistress, had not the courage to reprove the cook, nor durst tell the housekeeper, lest she should ask her what was her business in the kitchen, or call her spy-teller magpie, or give orders to the cook to bespatter her with a ladle full of fat whenever she came into her territories. Such hazards attends those that dare oppose extravagant cooks, or indolent housekeepers that are strangers to everything worthy of praise, and consequently very dangerous kitchen officers, for they consume their master's substance unmercifully. Had she tossed this oiled butter into an earthen pot, it might have fried fish, fritters, or pancakes, covered potted fowls, beef, or fish, but tossing it into the vennel is a crime that deserves the punishment of hunger, and bitterness of the want of butter all her days. That is, after she had left her plenty, and returned to her primitive homely cottage, as wilful waste brings woeful want, for which reason the good and profitable servant is on the safest side, she that holds fast her integrity, and would do her duty to the best of her knowledge. These resolutions deserves improvement. As I have acted in the station of cook and housekeeper, so have I been very successful in pleasing the families I served in that station. And as I have a great regard for the worthy sort of these servants, and would take a great pleasure to improve these worthies, that is, by telling them how I discharged the trust of deputy, I made the following resolutions, and kept them, resolved to do justice to masters and servants, not to leave that to be done in the morning that ought to have been done at night, resolved not to waste nor consume the property of the master, resolved not to waste nor consume the property of my master, nor suffer any of his servants to wrong him to my knowledge, resolved to be as careful of every individual of my trust as if the fortune had been my own, resolved to rise early in the morning, and never to exceed 6 o'clock if I was in health, nor to grudge rising 2 hours sooner if I had an elegant dinner to send up, resolved that every servant should have their meat in due season, and likewise every fowl that was fed for my master's table. My great care was to keep the feathered flock clear of diseases, which, without great care and pains, they are very subject to. And to prevent distempers, I never bought chickens with their feet tied together, and stopped into baskets and creels for this reason. The birds are confined to lie on their The birds are consigned to lie on their sides, which the stepping or trotting of the horses makes them full of bruises, and puts them into fevers. But the prudent farmers does not use their feathered flock so. They have large creels or baskets, puts them loose in, lets them have room to stand upon their feet, and they are no worse for their journey. These were the birds I always choosed to buy, and as my chicken coops had partitions that took out to make them less or bigger apartments, I always kept each brood to themselves, for as soon as mixed with strangers battle arrays ensued, which, to prevent, I never mixed them after. I have found by reason of their battles their heads have been so sore that they could not feed. Nay, the conquerors got bruises with their wings flapping in the coops with the battling. Yet the brood that is hatched and brought up together feeds fat, and quarrels none. Every night their troughs were washed clean, and clean hay put under them at 6 o'clock in the morning. Barley meal mixed pretty stiff with boiling water, and when cool dipped into skimmed milk, and so given the chickens in their clean troughs. My turkey pouts and capons I found fed best at their liberty loose in a house. I made them crammings of the same I fed the chickens with every morning, having their house clean swept, and clean straw laid in a corner to rub themselves in, which is as refreshing to them as their meat, and when they were full took the meat from them, served them at 12, and again at 6 in the evening, took the meat from the chickens, and served them as above. My green geese and ducks fed best together in a house loose. Then I fed them either with ground malt and buttermilk, or unground malt with boiling water poured over it, the last thing at night. This feeds chickens fat, giving it them in the above manner. Yet I don't think it feeds chickens, turkeys, or capons so white as milk and barley meal does, but as fat it will feed them. I drove them once a week to a pond to wash themselves, which gave them a great pleasure. They would flap their wings and rejoice when they returned amongst their clean straw. I never grudged the pains I took in feeding the fowls, for when I sent them up to the master's table, they were received with pleasure and applause, that sufficiently rewarded my labor. Yet it was no more than my duty, and what every servant in that post ought to do, or see it done. A new married lady related to my mistress, who had a lingering illness, occasioned by a miscarriage of her first child, was persuaded by her husband to take an airing with him in the coach, and to dine with my mistress, he ordering a servant to let her know his intention, and that there might be a boiled chicken for his wife. So I had orders for 4 boiled chickens, 2 young ducks, and 2 turkey pouts roasted. At the hour appointed, the squire and his lady came. The squire and his lady came, and dinner being ready, was sent up, and met with a most grateful reception from this worthy squire, who, with admiration, beheld his lady eat up a whole chicken, who said to her, "Much good may it do you, my dear, for I am sure you have not eat so hearty a meal this 2 months." "It is very true, sir," answered she, "and the reason is, that I never see such a chicken in my own house, for it is no bigger than a partridge, and as fat as a quail, so beautifully white, quite different from my chickens at home, that are skeletons, and of a different hue and taste from this chicken, that seems to sit very easy on my stomach. I have had a boiled chicken every day to my dinner these 6 weeks, but not one like this. Nor did I ever see a fat fowl at my table, which I impute to improper feeding." "In all probability that must be the reason," answered my mistress, "for I have very often taken notice of your poultry at the table, and am very sure that if they were duly attended, and proper care taken of them, they would be fat, and they are not fit to eat otherwise. So I have experienced, replied the other lady, yet the only reason that I can give is that my cook was trained at London, where she had all her fowls fed and killed ready for cooking. She is the only grave servant that I have, and was well recommended. I am therefore unwilling to accuse her for a fault that I cannot give a proper direction to amend. So unexperienced a housekeeper am I, that was left an orphan and married just out of the boarding school, for which reason my health and fortune may be impaired, and I utterly unable to rectify it. My dear despairing cousin, answered my mistress, pluck up your spirits, and there will be no hazard of health and fortune, for you shall stay with me, and try the sovereign virtue of my kitchen physic. For in my opinion, that is the only medicine you want at present, and I will send my cook to give yours a lesson of her method of feeding poultry, and many things that may differ from what she has been acquainted with. That is, to show her how much more is required of the country cooks than there is of the city cooks. And, added she, I am very sure that she will be ready and willing to give her wholesome cookery advice. Then, answered she, I will be infinitely obliged to her, and if you can spare her, she may go in the coach which is returning home, for I am fully determined to try the virtue of your kitchen physic. You oblige me much, my dear cousin. So my lady came and told that there must be some need of my advice to feed their poultry, and if she be sociable, help her in her deficiencies. If not, give yourself no concern, but come home in the morning according to my directions. I went, and was kindly received by my sister cook. The lady's maid went to wait on her mistress, and there was none to interrupt our conversation. So having our tea brought in great order, she dismissed the footman, and said, Statesmen have private interviews in politics, merchants in commerce, so let ours be upon the art of cookery. I answered, If that be our talent, let us be profitable servants, and improve it. Then said she, If I improve, I must be the beggar. I answered, If there was any knowledge in my possession worth acceptance, she might command it. Then, said she, my greatest want is to know how to make fowls fat, as in the town I had them fed, plotted, and ready for the pot or spit. But here I have them to feed, and instead of making them fat, behold, they are all skeletons. And more dies in the coops than lives. Chickens, turkey pouts, young ducks, and green geese dies, or pines in the coops. Indeed, sister, said I, where there is so much sickness in the coops, it may endanger the family's healths in the house. Sickness amongst poultry, do you say? Then I am a very improper physician, nor will pretend the least skill in curing their sickness. It must be sickness that causes so great a mortality in the coops, but this I imputed to their quarrelling, and more especially amongst the chickens, which I thought killed one another, said she, or rather wounded and bruised each other. Answered I, the agony of which might bring fevers upon the wounded, that might occasion their deaths, and likewise infect the conquerors and the whole feathered flock. But how to prevent it, said she, let me know, for judgment may be wanting, but care and pains was not. For every morning I see all the drawers that receive their dung taken out, their troughs clean washed, and fresh meat made them at the same time, which meat stood by them to eat when they pleased, till the next morning, when they were served again. Nor did I let any of the dead lie in the coop any time, lest they should stink and so offend the others. Indeed, sister, answered I never understood whether the poultry have the sense of smelling, as they have no noses. Yet I am very well assured that cleanliness is a great help to their thriving, but letting meat stand perpetually before them must pall their appetites. They are delicate creatures, and loathe their meat when satisfied, so that I never fail to take it from them in 10 minutes after I have served them, a sufficient time to fill themselves in. As to quarrels, I never have any amongst my chickens, for this reason, having a separate partition for every separate brood, and this keeps peace. But intermixing them with strangers is bloody wars. Every morning they have clean hay laid under them, and every day thrice fed, at 6 in the morning, at 12, and at 6 in the evening. Their troughs are washed clean, and as much meal mixed in the morning as will serve them all day. Turkeys and capons I feed in a house by themselves, on the same meat I feed the chickens with, only I roll it up in crammings, and sets them sweet milk to drink. My ducks and green geese I feed loose in a house, with ground malt and buttermilk, or scald's malt. Now I can prove by my book of poultry, both in the poultry living and poultry killed for the family's use, that I have been accountable to my lady of every individual fowl, even to the smallest chicken. Then certainly I must have been a very unprofitable servant, answered she, for I have not only wasted the property of my master, but am terribly afraid I have impaired the health of his lady, by sending her up chickens that were not fit to eat. For when I consider the difference betwixt the chickens I bought of the poulterers, and those I fed, and sent that dear lady to eat, they must have hurt her delicate constitution, and to give pain to so good a lady is sacrilege. Or is it possible ignorance can make an atonement for such a crime? Yes, very possible, answered I, as it is a common crime, which I am afraid many fine gentry are sufferers by, and are fed with distempered poultry by slothful and indolent servants, which is not your case, whose industry and integrity is firm, but judgment was wanting in poultry feeding, which made it a misfortune, but no crime. As for turkeys, capons, chickens, ducks, and geese, clean your coops of them. Let the ducks and green geese be put into a pasture where there is water for to wash in, and feed them with corn thrice a day. Set the other poultry at liberty, and feed them, but you must expect death for most of them. Then let your maid clean all the coops and houses, buy in a fresh stock, and get acquainted with the farmers' wives. These, in short, are the best birds' mothers, for they feed them with the overplus of their milkness. Nay, they have a share of their own victuals, will fly upon the tables, and pick the meat off their trenchers. These are half fed to your hand. Charge the good wives not to tie their feet, but to put them into a large creel or basket loose. Never confine your turkeys or capons in coops. It cripples and causes them to pine instead of fattening, and will swarm with lice for want of liberty to pick their feathers. Sweep their house every day, lay them clean straw, and have the same pleasure of your feathered flock I have of mine. I will, answers she, pursue this pleasure with diligence and care, with 1,000 thanks to you for the wholesome lesson you have taught me, for although I gave great content in town, I find myself very deficient in the country. In town I made my market every day, the butcher's meat so fresh and sweet that my beef gravy made sauces and soups delicious. But here we kill a beef once a month, and that alters the case, for I can but have fresh beef 1 week in the whole month. So there is 3 weeks of the month I have no beef soup nor beef gravy for sauces, without sending to the market for fresh beef. As salt beef is not fit for soups or sauces, to be sure, but if I have plenty of fresh beef, I can make gravy that will keep 2 months as strong and as delicious as the first day. And if you will try the experiment when you kill a beef, take the 4 hocks and break them. Season with a little salt, Jamaica, and black pepper. Then pack them down in a large stewing pot with a quart of water, and cover the pot close with paste. Cut and season the beef's neck in the above manner. Pot and paste it also, and heat an oven as hot as for baking household bread. Then set in these pots, daub up your oven, and let them stand all night. In the morning take them out, and the sinews will be as tender stewed as marrow, which sinews take from the other meat, cut them into 1/2-inch lengths, and put them separate into earthen pots, about the size or rather larger than a gill. Then strain the gravy through a clean hair sieve. Take up the 2 necks of beef, strain the gravy all into one pot, skim off all the fat, and strain the gravy through a clean flannel bag. Then take a well-tinned soup pan, set it upon a clear stove of cinders, put in this strong gravy, boil it quickly 1/2 an hour, and cover the potted sinews with it. Have as many pint broad earthen pots as will hold the remainder of the gravy. Leave room for 1/2 an inch deep of the beef fat that you skimmed off the gravy, which fat boil up in a saucepan. Pour it boiling hot over each pot of gravy, and let it stand till it be thoroughly cold. The gravy will be a stiff jelly, and the sinews will answer soups or ragouts. The same of palates. So there is gravy for soups or sauces, much stronger than you can pretend to make by frying the beef, and after boiling it is always ready and saves much trouble. I never want a store by me, for I can, by boiling it to a fine glue, keep it 6 months, with close sealing in little pots, and if a mess of soup is wanted, I have it in a minute. Neither do I ever want chicken broth, for when I have boiled chickens, I pack them close in a pan that just holds them, and this makes their broth stronger. Then I take the bones of a leg of veal, and the gristle of the knuckle, breaks and washes them clean, so puts my chicken broth into a little stewing pot, with the veal bones, 2 or 3 blades of mace, and pastes the pot close down, so sets it in an oven all night, skims off all the fat in the morning, and puts the broth through a clean flannel bag, then boils this strong chicken broth to a strong jelly, puts it into small earthen cups, and covers it with the fat I skimmed off. This answers various uses, for if any of the family wants chicken broth, I have it for them. Or if I want gravy for white sauces, it is ready for my use. By this forecast, I save my master many a chicken, and myself the trouble of killing them. For the future, this lesson which you have so frankly given me, answered she, shall be my greatest pleasure to practice. For every word you have spoken to me convinces me of my errors, and of the truth, justice, reason, and consideration that appertains to the true art of cookery, which I find I have been prodigious ignorant and deficient in. Well, says I, as I am the elder sister, I must accept of the compliment you make me. So let us sleep on it this night, and we will rise in the morning, for I will be on horseback at 6, home at 8, so to work in the kitchen at 9. At 1/2 an hour after 5, when I had got on my clothes, behold, in comes my sister, to inquire how I had slept in a strange bed. Very well, answered I. That has not been my case, said she, for I have been so tortured with dreaming of sick poultry all the night, that I arose at 4 o'clock, and have set all the prisoners at liberty. Much to my shame go with me, and I did behold them accordingly, and saw the lame, maimed, and the blind. Your green geese and ducks may recover in time, said I, by bathing and feeding, but very few of your chickens. Not one, answered she, for they shall die in an hour, and I will buy in as many healthy ones as at my own expense, after the house and coops are clean washed. Don't kill the turkey pouts, but turn them to the backyard, and feed them with corn and grass. Physic may set them to rights again, and this precaution I give you. Likewise, said I, see that you never take notice to your lady in the least of the sickness that has been in the coops for this reason, because it may do her more harm in thinking than it has done in eating those chickens. And if you duly observe the rules that I have prescribed to you, there never will be sickness amongst your poultry. Fear not, answered she, I have printed each article on the table of each hand, the execution of which shall be my greatest pleasure. But here is one proper item that I must give you. It suits this present case. As you have no fat chickens, boil rice in water, and after in a little milk, sweeten it with a little brown sugar, and it will feed them fat in 4 days. But let them be fed 4 times a day with this rice, milk, and sugar. So after we got breakfast, I took my leave, and told her I expected my visit repaid me the first opportunity. She promised she would, and I was at home as the clock struck 8. My lady, being told that I was come, sent for me, and asked my opinion of the housekeeper. I answered, Madam, I have a very good opinion of her, for she very frankly owned her deficiency in poultry feeding, and with pleasure and a heart full of gratitude, returned me her unfeigned thanks for the method of feeding poultry that I prescribed her, which she acknowledged was more consistent with reason than the method she had taken in feeding them. And although her judgment I believe to be very good in other respects, yet she seemed more desirous of having my opinion than of giving her own. I believe her to be a servant of worth and integrity, and very deserving of the trust reposed in her. And it is my belief that you will not for the future see an ill-fed fowl come to her master's table, for she was amongst them at 4 o'clock this morning. Industry and care she wants not. I am pleased, answered my lady, with the account you have given me of her. Did not you invite her to my house? I did, madam, and she promised me she would the first opportunity. I will procure an opportunity by asking her mistress, for I have a great veneration for such servants as you describe her to be. To prove the truth, madam, says I, keep her lady a week, and if she has not fat chickens for her lady, trust no more to my skill. Well then, answered my mistress, to try the variety of thy judgment, I will detain the lady, and have thy assertion proved. So my lady made the young couple very merry at breakfast with the account that I had given her of their housekeeper, and they all consented to go home at the week's end. Accordingly they did so, and found she had as fat chickens and as beautiful as mine, to the great pleasure of my lady as well as hers. And from that time there was an honest friendship contracted between her and me. There being so great an intimacy betwixt the two families, the young lady used to bring her in the coach with herself to pay me a visit, for they knew the very great regard we had for each other. For she was generally esteemed being both the complete housewife and the virtuous humane creature. If any poor family in the neighbourhood were in distress, she informed her lady of their want, whose pleasure was to relieve them. This young creature took great delight in doing good, gave medicines to the poor for most disorders, and this worthy servant was always ready to deliver their complaints, never grudging the pains she took for the poor. I soon after removed from that family 20 miles distant, so that our future correspondence was by writing, till we both entered into the marriage state, which put us a greater distance from each other. Some time after her marriage, she wrote me a long letter, wherein she expressed the happiness she possessed in one of the best of husbands, that love and riches increased every day, and begged of me to give her an account of my situation of life. I answered hers, and told the great pleasure I had in her good fortune, both in the blessing of a good husband and riches, a reward for her virtue and good works, and told her that as the situation of my chance had fallen in a public way, innkeeping, which had not afforded me that tranquillity she possessed, I would not go to particulars, only acquainted her I was in a middling state, some better and many worse. I was answered with a very moving epistle, desiring a more particular relation of my situation, but I considered as it would not be satisfactory, never answered her last request, so our correspondence dropped till after the publication of my book of cookery, which upon perusal I found I had made omissions of receipts, but have since supplied these wants, as a further service to my readers. As she possessed an active soul, I was perfectly assured that in whatever station of life she lived, she would improve her talent. So having a little spare time the latter end of the last year, I took post-chaise and made a tour 30 miles across the country to see my friend. She was at a loss at the first sight to know who I was, till she heard me speak. She said, "There is the voice, but where is the person?" yet got me in her arms, saluted, and gave a hearty welcome. And as I had dined on the road, she made coffee and tea, and told me her husband was not to be at home till next day. I said, if I have not the pleasure of his company, I hope to have yours all to myself. Certainly, said she, only the interruption of my young brood. And as she thus spake, in comes 5 beautiful daughters. The eldest was just 13 years of age, and the youngest 8. So neat, and their behavior as if they had been come home from a boarding school, to pay their parents a visit, every one making a low curtsy as they entered the room. We having done tea, they drunk each 2 dishes. The eldest washed the china and set it into the storeroom, which door opened into the room we sat in. So says I, is this your storeroom? Let me see how you have it furnished. You shall, says she. So in we went. Now, says she, behold the rule and order of an industrious and careful husband, who built me this conveniency and shelved it round. On that side is one with 5 partitions for bottled wines, each containing 10 dozen of bottles. So saying, she opened the lids, took out a bottle of each wine, and called for 5 glasses, filling each glass up with the separate wines. Now, said she, taste these wines, and give me your opinion of them. There is Burgundy, French, red port, Frontignac, and Sweet Mountain. So tasting the wines, which were all as clear as rock water, I said, if I had seen these wines in a gentleman's house or any tavern, they might have passed for foreign, for they are strong and must be of a good age. New wines are like new malt liquor. These wines are rough, well flavored with age, and has a strong body, which I am pretty sure are all of your own making. She, smiling, told me I was the first that ever disputed their being foreign, for gentlemen stewards have protested that better wines were not in their masters' cellars than the wines they drunk here. But indeed this is a proper place for the bottles. It is warm in winter and cool in summer. So is the cellar below, it being vaulted, and all the wines are 7 years old before they are bottled. For as I see there is no halting before cripples, be that as it will, gratitude obliges me to let you into the secret of made wines, as frankly as you gave me the secret of poultry feeding, which you shall see. I have not forgot by my feathered flock, which are beautifully fat. But first survey my conveniency. There stands my wine-press, where I made my first great quantity. I pressed the fruit in a cheese-press, put it into the cloths, and so pressed it in the cheese-fats. In the same manner the cheese is pressed. So set a broad clean tub to save the juice. But my endearing man got the dimensions of a wine-press, and made it his dear self. Likewise he made all the chests for flour, oatmeal, barley meal, groats, and bran. Likewise these set of boxes for my salves and drugs, shelves for my salvers, delf, and china. And opening the wine-cellar door, said, behold my stock of wines. So numbering the casks, said I, your stock surmounts any of our northern squires that I have seen, for by my calculation you have 18 hogsheads of wine in casks, besides the 50 dozen of bottles. And this is a quantity that very few noblemen have, I dare say. But let us go and have some conversation, for I long to hear some of your history, and am sure it will give me infinite pleasure. So we returned to the parlour again, finding it clean dusted, a good fire, bright irons, and clean hearth. We sat ourselves down, and thus she began her narrative. I think I gave you an account in a letter of the ill fortune of my mistress's maid, in a runaway wedding with the footman, which my dear lady was so good as to express great concern for her unthinking maid, that had so poorly bestowed herself on a simple fellow that could not labour for bread for her nor himself, and 'tis my opinion, as soon as poverty affects them, he will certainly change his livery for a red one. But what opinion have you of this march? Oh, but what opinion have you of this match? Indeed, madam, answered I, if pride and vainglory will make a good husband, he has enough of that. Nay, said the dear lady, her wisdom is as small as his, and I wish they may both deceive me. But I am determined not to have a giddy young lass about me again. You shall be my maid and housekeeper, so hire a professed cook. I answered, I had a very good one of my own making. She has been a servant as long as I have, and is not much inferior to myself in cookery. As to the housekeeping that I perform, but the cookery I have taught her, and was inquiring for a place for her, as she has a sister that was to come in her place. You bid me choose my assistant when I first came to my place. This is the servant, and I have proved her integrity. You have obliged me very much, said the worthy lady, in teaching me a cook in your own way. For I have very often thought your fatigue too great to perform the part of cook and housekeeper, for which reason I wanted gladly to have had you for my own maid and housekeeper, but was afraid of not getting so good a cook, for you pleased me in my meat dressing. I never liked this flisky girl that waited on me, for if she had brought me a message of any poor creature's complaint, I see her countenance turn sour, and have rebuked her and said, I wish she might not have their complaint, and meet with as little pity as seemingly she showed to those in distress. So thus I answered, my dear angel, blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. For, madam, if your eye be good, God forbid that mine be evil, to the prejudice of my fellow creatures. For as far as is in my power, I will cheerfully assist them, both in delivering their complaints to you, and likewise your relief to them. Said she, your perquisites will be better as to my castings, and you have the same wages. So there is a guinea earnest for your new place. And if 6 pounds wages will do for the cook, let her hire a kitchen maid. This preferment I told her to her great joy, and she hired her sister. So they lived in peace, and did their work to admiration. No servants upon earth were more happy than we were of a worthy master, a pious, generous, and charitable lady, whose humanity was such that she fed the hungry, clothed the naked, and was a great doctress to them afflicted with sickness. Happy would be the distressed, did every one discharge their stewardships like this happy pair, for they delighted in a rural life. He built a house for a school, with 2 rooms for the master and his wife to live in, and put 40 poor children to school, 20 boys and 20 girls, clothed them every year, were taught to read, write, and vulgar arithmetic. They likewise clothed 30 poor old men and women with new shoes, stockings, 2 shirts, hat, coat, waistcoat, and breeches to the men. And the women they gave shoes, stockings, gown, petticoat, apron, shifts, caps, etc. And when they had all got on their new clothing, my good master and mistress would view them with pleasure, he giving the men each a shilling, and the women the same, to handle their new pockets. In short, they were public blessings, and indeed their ways were great delight. As I was an excellent horsewoman, and my lady seldom wanted patience, I arose 2 hours sooner in the morning than her maid used to do, and had my little pad saddled. So visited the sick every morning, always telling my lady what effects the medicines had on them that had taken them. This was great pleasure to her, for she said that my judgment of the sick exceeded hers. I told her I was far from presuming to vie with her judgment, but very desirous of assisting her patients, and that she said she was very well assured I would be rewarded hereafter. So one morning, as I was upon my round visiting my sick, behold, there came to me a neighbouring bluff gentleman, having an estate of 300 pounds per annum. What, says he, mistress, are you riding without a servant to open you the gates? I need none, sir, answered I, and there being a gate just at hand, I rode up and opened it, so put my galloway into a canter. But my spark, being better mounted, came up to me, and said, Why so nice, mistress? I am no stranger. I have dined many a time with your master, and wanted an opportunity to speak to you. So taking hold on my bridle, he said, "Agod, it is a pity you should be a servant, for you have a lady's face, a face that I could find in my heart to bestow all my land on, which is as pretty a plat of ground as ever crow flew over. Faith, I have often thought of that countenance, and I am not jesting," said he. "And if you was, sir, I would not take the advantage of your jest. Go home and admire your fine plat of ground, and don't interrupt me with your impertinence." So plucked my bridle out of his hand, struck into a gallop, and away I went, leaving my lover with his plat of fine land standing like a scarecrow, and I returned home another way. However, my chap came that very day to dine with my master. After dinner he told the proposals he had made, and the repartee I gave him. Likewise begged of my master that he would let me know his designs were honourable, and that he would settle all his land on me and mine. My master, promising him his interest, communicated the whole story to his lady, who thought the proffer very well worth my acceptance. One morning she took me into her closet, and told me what generous proposals this gentleman had made my master, that he would marry me, and settle all his fortune on me and mine. "Madam," answered I, "his proposals I cannot accept, for if his generosity be great to me, it's slender to his own posterity. Should I bring forth no children to him, yet have I the power invested in me to settle all his fortune on my relations, and to take that fortune out of an ancient family, whose chief possessed it for some 100 years by past." "Well, my dear," said that good lady, "but in case it should be so, you will have the power to settle it on the right line." "But then, madam," said I, "would not my own relations have just cause of complaint that such a fortune was in my power as might raise my family, and I had left it to my husband's friends? Besides, I have a more material objection, and that is, I cannot love the man were his fortune 10 times as much as it is. So I scorn to accept that fortune when it is not in my power to give my heart in return." "Oh, my dear girl," answered my mistress, "thy sentiments are worthy of praise. I should deprive myself of a valuable servant very willingly, if it had been to thy own choice. But thou hast a soul that scorns an unworthy thought or action. Only this fortune might have made thou easy in circumstances, and enabled thee to have been helpful to thy fellow creatures. But whether such a man would suffer his wife so to do or not becomes a query. I should be terribly afraid of his bidding me distribute my own fortune whenever he beheld my liberality to the indignant part of mankind, and not his amongst beggars. For which reason, if ever I enter into that state, it shall be with one that I think comes nearer my own sentiments, and that I am very well assured does not exceed me much in fortune. I had rather eat the bread of my labour and industry than break my peace for plenty of wealth. I esteem reverence, serve you honestly, and is content in my state. Would you have me leave a certainty for an uncertainty? I might fear the man, but cannot love him, so will not break my peace for him." She said, "By no means, for that was laying a foundation for a curse, and she was sure there was a blessing in store for me. In short, my dear lady told my master my resolution. He told my pretender, who took it in such disdain that he condemned himself for his mean suit, and said he might always have stooped and taken up nothing, that if ever he was slighted again, it should be from his equals, and not an inferior. My master told me, and I never see him, and my mistress takes such a fit of hearty laughter. "Oh, sir," answered I, "he only stands condemned as it is. But had he made all his land over to me and my heirs, in all likelihood he would have hanged himself in 6 months' time." "Then," answered my master, "you would have been a rich young widow of a large fortune at your own disposal." "But I think myself 10 times richer as I am, sir," answered I. Then said he, "In my opinion your affections are mixed another way, which I will leave to your mistress to inquire into, as I don't expect the discovery in my hearing." And as he spoke the word, walked out of the room, leaving my worthy lady with me, who said, "Is your master right in his conjecture? I know thy honour to be frank, and will make no scruple to make me thy confidant. For if he be more deserving, far be it from me to deprive him of the happiness of so good a wife, as I am very well assured that thou will be a daily blessing to a good husband." "Thou made me an excellent cook, and I desire you will instruct my new housekeeper that it may be kept in the same economy. I would not alter the least of thy rule and order, for I see very few tables set out with that decorum as mine. Nay, your master has very often told what great encomiums gentlemen have given him of my extraordinary management, whose table was supported with all rarities in the season, dressed in the best manner, without the least noise or disturbance, whereas their houses were a hell, their meat a surfeit, and the brawling of wives and servants were so many tormentors to them. But I have told them all these praises were due to you, who made all the house easy by your industry and care, and those who had such hard fate as the torture that such servants must give to masters and mistresses, I pitied. For if it was my own case, I should be miserable. The integrity and diligence of servants may enable the masters to perform the duty of good and faithful stewards. I said, "There is certainly great wisdom in your sentiments, madam. But if every master took such delight in the duty of the good and faithful steward as my master does, their virtuous example would be a great means to moralize their servants. A manifestation of which is in your own. You have been 9 years married, and has all your servants you first had. But these two that married from you, every servant you have is sensible of the blessing they daily enjoy, under the protection of so virtuous a master and mistress. I lived 3 months in separate places, quitting the 3 months' wages to be quit of the bad places, and have expostulated to my fellow servants the separate tortures that attended those separate places, which showed them the difference between good and bad places, the happiness that servants possessed in the former, and the misery of the latter. How well the peace and plenty that we daily enjoyed deserved our diligence and pains." "Gratitude," the butler would reply, "obliges me to spur up all my industry to grace my master's table with clean plates, knives, forks, and glasses." "So will I," answered the laundry maid, "with clean linen. And says the cook, I will feed my fowls fat, and will show my art of cookery in dressing the meat to grace his table. And, says I will grace it with a dessert. And says the dairymaid, I will take care to have good butter and cream. The housemaid replies, my diligence and pains shall be shown in my clean rooms, well-polished brasses and irons. Well spoke fellow servants, says the coachman, my cattle, coach, and harness shall be as trim. And so shall my saddle horses and furniture, answers the groom. And after all, says the kitchen maid, I have as much cleaning as any of you, and shall take an equal share of pleasure in the execution of my duty in the menial station I enjoy, under the best of masters and respectful fellow servants. So thou does, answered I, and I can observe a secret pleasure to attend you after your work is done, as you sit admiring your clean pots, pans, pewter, dressers, etc., etc. So I am convinced a secret pleasure reigns in every servant's bosom to discharge their several duties to those two worthies they serve. And who would not think the prime of youth well spent in the service of them, that has the interest and well-being of their servants so much at heart? not in the supporting them with the blessings of this life, but in showing them the tract to a better by their virtuous example and goodness. For we are not under the tyranny of cruel masters horsewhipping the men, nor implacable mistresses tormenting the maids. It is very evident, answered my mistress, that servants have as great souls, and sometimes greater, than their masters. Did not the great and bountiful giver of all benefits, according to his wife, dispensations to his creatures? Oh, wait. I said wise. Whoops. According to his wise dispensations to his creatures, give them their talents of wisdom, riches, health, strength, and understanding. He did not design his bounties of riches to be exercised in cruelties and oppressions, more especially to any household servants, whom I esteem for their integrity and care. But you set them the example of industry, gratitude, and humility, so that all the rule and order of my house is owing to your good precedent. Yet it is my opinion I shall not have you much longer, by the answer you made me in the choice of a husband, who is to be near your fortune and sentiments. If any pretender has the endowments of the latter, it would be a pity to keep you separate, although my loss will be great that shall never have such a servant. You have a complete housewife in your house, a virtuous, industrious servant, and may confide in her integrity. I have completed her as much for the housekeeper as I did the cook, and her sister is as capable to act in the station of a cook, so that you will want only a kitchen maid if I leave you. And as I have lived with this honest servant near 10 years, can witness her gratitude to heaven with tears, for raising her from so poor and low a condition to so much peace and plenty. She has repeated the extravagancies of her father, and likewise his ingratitude to her mother, who stole her from her father's house at 17, which broke his heart. He died and left a pretty estate, which he spent, and reduced his wife and family to the want of meat and clothes. But the pains that poor creature took to relieve these unfortunate distresses in her family would surprise you. Her eldest daughter declares she will not run the risk of her mother's hardships for no man upon earth, hoping that she would discharge her duty of trust in her place, with that integrity to her worthy mistress, as should not endanger her of losing it, and likewise to be so careful of her wages as to save something to support her after she was disabled of performing servile duty. If she holds fast her integrity, answered my mistress, she will be justly entitled to her master's bounty, besides mine, who think ourselves bound in duty to make provision for such faithful, diligent servants in their age, that spend the prime of their youth in our service. But why did not you inform of the distress of her unfortunate mother? But why did you not inform as of the distresses of her unfortunate mother? It would have been a charity done me to have given me an opportunity of relieving her. Madam, answered I, she told me that her mother was released from these hardships as soon as her daughters were able to spin, nor did she ever let her wants be known. Even in the greatest distress, after her father obliged her to sign the right of all her fortune to him, he sold it and went over to France, and never returned again, leaving her with 4 daughters, the eldest of them being but 5 years of age. But this industrious mother has not let her daughters spend their time in indolence nor vanity. You have 2 of them, which, in my opinion, are as good servants as any in England. That is owing to you, their teacher, for their mother might teach them spinning, knitting, and sewing, but her low station of life disabled her from completing them of cookery and housewifery. That valuable treasure you possess beyond most of women in economy and complete housewifery, which you have so frankly bestowed on these girls, must lay them and me under great obligations to you. For there are very few so generous of their knowledge in the art of cookery, as to give gratis what others would not part with for money. Heaven was kind in bestowing such a servant on me, that has instilled decorum and good order in my family. I answered, 'twas a double duty incumbent on me, in gratitude to the best of mistresses, so humane, charitable, and benevolent, whose good works I daily admired, and would imitate to the best of my ability. My mother gave 20 pounds and 3 years' service to a pastry cook with me, at the 15th year of my age. I am now 30, and have improved my talent. In this servant I beheld a generous soul full of industry and gratitude, and took great pleasure in communicating to her my instructions and advice. She has been so quick of apprehension that she improved what I taught her, has instructed her sister, and you'll find her exceed me, having now in her possession all I could teach her, besides a fruitful head of her own. So my dear lady told me, if I had had her fortune, how far I would have exceeded her in good works, and said, she rejoiced she had such good and worthy servants, trained up by my instructions. And now, said she, as all your sentiments are frank, let me know what happy man engages your affections, and how long he has possessed that treasure. You need not blush, for I am convinced he is a virtuous lover. I answered that I had great reason to believe him such. He is a mechanic, madam, says I. His master was that architecture that undertook all the building of this house, out-offices, schoolhouse, etc. He was foreman over the work, and employed 3 years in this building, being boarded in the steward's house, a relation of his. And when his first son was made a Christian, I was desired to stand godmother, and this youth was a godfather. Although he had a beautiful person and behavior, yet I did not much mind him, nor even knew him, although he had oh goodness. Although he had a beautiful person and behavior, yet I did not much mind him, nor even knew him, although he had wrought near 3 years in the building, and had my orders for making the conveniences of the storeroom, laundry, and dairy. He having a quick genius, and diligently observed my directions, yet I never gave him the applause that I generally gave the other artists. Lest he might have some secret vanity of thinking that he merited my esteem, which was so far from it, that I did not know him to be the man, till the steward asked him how long the work would be in finishing. He answering, in a month's time, and that will make out 3 years the workmen have been employed in the improvements your worthy master has made about his house. So, said I, is this the young man that made all my conveniences in my storeroom and other places? Indeed, I beg pardon, for I have not seen you since you finished my apartment, so that I had quite forgot you. But, said he, I wish you had been no more significant in my esteem than I have been in yours, and perhaps I might have forgot you also. Sir, answered I, it is not worth the notice of your sex. Let my significancy be less or more, they are not to be better or worse for it.